sequence. What problems do you encounter? Could you encounter, or have you encountered in putting up panels on the outside of the building? What issues?
They are very heavy.
Oh, come on. Big fella like you? Yeah, you will see.
They are very heavy.
Huh?
A big panel is heavy.
Actually, in the overall scheme of things, guys, we're considered lightweight. You know, if you're looking at a reader system or some of the other panels that are out there, okay, granted the big panels are about 52 kilos or whatever. They're not easy to manipulate, they're not easy to hold in place when you're getting the fixings in place. Yeah, I know. That's why I'm going to show you a way to get over that. And that's where my friend John comes in. Any other issues?
The subsurface that you're going to mount your brackets on,
Yeah.
it needs to be level and square.
Yeah.
Or level.
Yeah, we'll rephrase that. The surface that you will put your brackets on, yeah, I don't supply brackets. Okay? So the surface you're putting your brackets on can be up and down and all over the place. Yeah, exactly. What else?
Drilling and cutting.
Yeah, drilling and cutting. Always done at the ground, never done up on the scaffolding or in place on the wall. Okay?
The alignment of the panels, why are you fixing?
Yeah, that can be an issue when you're trying to...
You've drilled everything right, getting those boards up, lining up.
Lining them up and doing this and making sure everything... No, just get the rivet in quick! Get the rivet in! Yeah, exactly. That's where my friend John comes in. Yeah? Classic problems, guys. 50 years ago, the guys in Europe had exactly the same issues, and problems you guys have. And you're cursing the day that Marinder turned up to sell them boards to that architect, because she is just making my life hell. That's where I come in. I'm going to make your life easier. I'm going to show you a way, and we're going to turn the whole principle of building on its head. I don't care if you laugh at me, I don't care if you don't do it, but I'm going to give you 50 years of experience to show you which is the best way to do it for you guys as installers. And that is, we work from the top of the facade down the facade. Okay? We don't start like normal people and start at the bottom and work up. Now, I do fully understand that on larger buildings or tall buildings, sometimes you may be forced to put the panels on before the elevation has been topped out and finished. I agree totally. But you can still do this in sections. You can still start halfway up, come down, and then wait, start half at the top and come down to meet it. That isn't an issue. Okay? You can still go bottom to top. I don't care. But I'm going to point out the pitfalls, and then you have to solve the pitfalls to get over them issues. Right? And the reason I do this, and we recommend this is the best way of doing it for you guys, the panels can be supported, not by you, by my mate John. Alright, John will come clear in a minute. And it wasn't me picked out the name, one of the girls picked out the name at the start of the week. The panels can be easily adjusted. You can easily move it. You can easily get it into position before you fix it. And then when it's in position before fixing, I can guarantee you on a large panel, I can hold it in place with just 2 fingers. Pay attention. No damage to the edges of the panel. The panel edges are all protected. No issue there. How many of you guys wear bally shoes when you're working on a job? You don't. I know they're kind of going, geez, this is a crazy Irish guy. You're right, I am a crazy Irish guy. No question. You're using boots. The site is normally dirty. You're normally working in a dirty environment. Your clothes can get dusty, and our panels are dusty from time to time. But if you're working from bottom to top, sorry, I have my back to you. If you're working from ground up, you're always working over the one you've just fixed. Remember what we said at the start of the day. This is an aesthetical, pre-finished panel. If you want to scratch it, if you want to make it hard, if you want to go back and clean it and repair it after every job, be my friend. I don't care. But if you're working top to bottom, you've got to put in extra protection there. If you're working top down, you're always working away from what you've just completed. And if you can time it and plan it correctly on with the main contractor, you should nearly be the last thing on the facade. And as you come down, they drop the scaffolding down at each level. Panel on, clean. Scaffolding down. Panels on, clean. Scaffolding down. And the reason why I say that is Irish little story number 3 of the day, is that I was on a job, and I do understand. The installer and the main contractor usually does not get paid for the material that's sitting in his store yard until the material has actually been put into place on the building. I don't know if that's the same here in South Africa, but that's normally the way. And because we're a high value material, you may be forced a little bit sooner in the time of the contract, if the panels are available, to put the panels on the wall, and then there's going to be other trades following in after you. Namely guys that are doing rendering, namely guys that may be doing the roofing, namely guys that may be doing the windows. Now, do you honestly think that any of these other businesses give an absolute hoot about your panels that you've done your best to put up and they look fantastic? Of course they don't. Don't give them monkeys. Don't give anything. They don't care. They absolutely hate trying to do anything to help the situation. The situation basically comes around that what happens is, who is now going to protect your panels that you have spent all the time putting up correctly? Who's going to do it? You may have to, but have you built that into your cost at the quotation at the start? Of course you haven't. And that can be a big cost. You imagine 200 square meters of facade to protect from a guys who are doing painting or whatever. It ain't going to work. So be very careful about that when you're running your contracts. Yeah? Make sure you consider that when it's being done. But if you can be the last one on the facade, it makes life so much easier for you guys. Okay? This is something that's quite important, is the framing system. Will you be putting up the frame as well as the panels, or will somebody else be putting up the frame?
We normally do the frame ourselves.
You normally do the framing, and this is the same guys. You guys do the framing and you guys do the panels as well, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Well, at least that way you have a safety net in the sense that you know the panels are, that the framing system has been fixed and is secured back. If you're ever on a job, where another company has picked the framing system, be very, very careful. Or even if you've done the framing system and it's been up there for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, be very, very careful. The M&E guys, the electrical guys, the plumbing guys could have come along, loosened some of your brackets, loosened some of your bolts to get pipes in, to get wires in, and not fix them back up correctly. Yeah? So just be careful of that. Make sure everything is fully secure before you start fixing. Clamps are very important accessory to have. Makes life easier for you. When we're starting to fix, we normally start in the middle with the fixed points and we radiate outwards. Okay? What makes it very easy, if you start here, the panel is held in place, the next guy can start moving over and start getting prepared for the next panel to go on. Now, the mounting sequence. I'd like you to introduce you to my new friend, John. John is basically a piece of aluminium angle, approximately 6 meters long. Yeah? And he becomes your new best buddy. In fact, in Europe we work on generally 2-man teams with one of these rails. Now this is my rail here, and what I have done is I've actually fixed a spirit level to the underside of the rail so I don't have to have a 2-hand operation when I'm fixing the rail. Put on the rail, see that it's level, clamp it off. Just clamp it. Here today we're using vice grips, but you can have a different clamps to do that. You clamp on that rail up the building. High level up, first row at the top. You can now lift a 50 kilo panel and rest it on the rail. You don't have to hold it. It's easy to adjust left, it's easy to adjust right. And then when you want to hold it into place, you just put your hand against it and hold it into place.
It's the same as the wall time.
Yeah. But have you done it?
But then you need to start on top.
Yes. or further up the building.
Yeah.
No, the
Even
six
halfway
will
up.
just be right when you come down. You don't come down to the bottom and you got off.
Yeah, exactly. And I show you a way of, like as I said, you can go bottom up, and there is going to always be circumstances at the bottom of the facade or around the window where you can't do this. But I'll give you a little trick that'll make life easier to reduce the risk of anything going wrong on that in a minute. But by using the horizontal rail and starting further up the facade, by bringing this in, it gets over most of the issues you've had. The weight of the panel, trying to get the joints correctly, trying to adjust it when you're fixing it, trying to hold it, problems with the wind and everything. Because once it's in place and it's fixed, you just simply lift up the next panel and the next panel and the next panel, sliding them across till you get your 10mm joints. Now, the question you had on the glue about the joints. If you imagine this was being glue fixed and not rivet fixed, put up your rail, measure on your rail the panel plus the joint, panel plus the joint, and just mark the rail. When you get your panel up that has and the glue is on, line it up with the mark on the rail and push it against. Yeah? Or have a spacer there and you're just pushing it against it. That's how you control the joints when you're glue fixing it. You drop the rail, everything is fixed in place. You bring up the rail, the height of the panel plus the size of the joint, and you simply pop in the next rail, slide it left, slide it right till it all ends up nice and lined, and you pop fix it. Move across, done. All the way. And you just proceed across and down. Normally in a 6 meter strip, if possible down. You can do a 3 meter strip, you can do whatever strip. You can do the panels vertically if you want. But it makes life that bit easier for you. Here you can see the rail, temporary rail support. There's a spacer, 10mm spacer. You can pop on this panel, slide it across till it hits the spacer, hold it, and then fix it. You know. As a procedure for fixing the panels, we have found that over the last number of decades that this for you guys is probably the most efficient, the most effective, and the quickest way in and out of doing it. Okay, but it kind of turns the whole thinking of how to build a facade on its head a bit. And it might take a little bit of convincing to the main contractor to allow you to do this on the site. But that's where you need to do it up front at an early stage and get some kind of agreements. If you don't, it's going to take you longer and harder to do. This is the risk of using little spacers, right? However, a far bigger risk of using little spacers on top of the panel as you're working up is that we're 50 kilos, you have 8mm, you lift up a panel on a spacer on 8mm. When you put your hand on to hold the panel in place, there could be a tendency for the big panel to pull out a little bit at the bottom, and then what's going to happen? Straight down the side of the building. You're going to be lucky if you don't kill anyone underneath you. With my friend John, I know it's a bit of a joke calling him John, but with my friend, even when you push on, you've at least got 50, 60mm of a safety net that you'll never ever drop a panel down the side of the building either. Okay? So, to get over this issue of happening here, what we can do, it's a very bad picture so I'll draw it up here, is you can take a spacer and you can wrap it in a piece of rubber or something, soft material. So when the weight of the panel comes on top, and squashes down onto the bottom, you can simply pull out the spacer and then pull out the rubber with it after, and it protects the edges of the panel from the risk of chipping and damaging. Okay? I've also seen some guys make up spacers, a 2-piece spacer like this, which then has like a pin in it here, which has a pin through it that holds the 2 pieces together. You put it on, they pull the pin, and then the thing separates out. Okay? I've seen that used also on a job site. So there are ways of doing it to try and maintain the risk. The only risk you have of doing it this way is that, you know, okay, you might be able to manage the risk of, okay, if we're doing that elevation and we have to do this technique on 3 or 4 boards instead of 100 boards, the risk of damage happening, because you're going to be more conscious of it falling down the building and stuff, is going to be reduced. And usually when you're playing around windows and things like that, it's usually smaller panels you're working with as well. So just bear that in mind. Any questions? Makes sense. Am I still a crazy Irish guy? Of course I am.
Moving the boards.
Yeah. Sorry?
The top down. Actually passing the boards down. I could imagine that would get damaged, you know.
No.
Done 3 or 4 rows now, you're bringing the material down and you're moving
No. You still have to build the materials up from the ground up.
Go.
Yeah. You don't move all the material up the roof and then drop them down. No. You still have your materials at the bottom, you move up the top row, you bring up the materials for the next row.
And then handing on the material up the scaffold.
Yeah, but I'm going to say something to you, right? Okay, you're on the top row of scaffolding. The material has come up, right? I take it you guys here are advanced enough to have staging posts or places where your platforms and your material get lifted to on that level. Yeah? So it comes up to the level you're on, but you have no stuff above you. You're on the top of the scaffolding. What have you? You have your handrail, your kickboard behind you. What have you in front of you against the facade? You might just have a handrail to negotiate. But if you're working down down the facade, as well as what you're standing on the handrail on the inside, you also have, because what are they? I'm not the tallest of guys. You're pretty tall. I'd say your head is pretty close when you have your hard hat on to what the scaffolding is above you.
2 meters.
You're 2 meters. We're on 3 meter boards. So now you have more awkwardness starting at the bottom, negotiating the panel in around, particularly when you have platforms over your head as well.
I'm not saying working from bottom up, I'm saying just moving the panels.
Yeah.
And you got a way of that, you know, and those edges don't get damaged.
So what happens, you would use oversized pallets, of course. How do you normally, is it your responsibility to get the panels up the building, or is that provided by the main contractor?
Our responsibility.
Yeah?
That's why we can't be a 2-man crew.
Right. So, but the bigger problem, if there's a tower crane that you have access to, you're alright? Yeah? The issue is when there's no tower crane.
When it's scaffolding and you go 35 meters,
Yeah.
every 2 meters you've got 2 people to take the panel up.
Every platform we take 2.
Yeah?
And then just go up and then put it on.
Then it's getting heavy.
Yeah.
It's getting scratched.
I'll give you an example. I was in Colombia on one of their jobs, and they were going up 6 stories with the panels. And what they done was, it's a bit like you were saying, they used the suction pads, and they had one on each side, the front and the back of the panel, and then they wrapped the rope around the bottom, and they were pulling them up on pulleys, straight up the side of the building and in, up the side of the scaffolding and then in. You got to have some way of doing it. Normally, if you're 35 meters, normally on the side of the scaffoldings, we would normally end up having there's a
Hoist system.
yeah, a hoist system that's bolted to the side of the building, that's part of the scaffolding, that people and guys get to use their materials up and down a high building like
It
that.
need to be in your costing.
It needs to be in your costing if you have to provide it. That's sometimes it's generally provided as a general cost by the main contractor, but you may have to contribute something towards it for the weeks you're using it. Do any of you guys work on the movable platforms? Where they build it to- huh?
Cherry pickers and stuff like that.
No. I don't mean
the long
I
one.
mean the big long workable platforms where you have 2 towers bolted to the side of the building and this whole platform,
With the steel rope going up and down.
yeah, which may be 10, 15 meters long.
Young man.
Huh?
Young man.
Young man you call him here, is it?
Started.
Skyjack you call him. Not a skyhook, a skyjack. Skyjack, okay. Different names, we call them movable platforms, okay. Yeah, if it's possible, they're the best things ever. You can do it on, of course, You can do it on scissor lifts as well, of course. Yeah, they'll only get you up to a certain height as well. I've seen it done on the booms as well. But yeah, you have to think about how you're going to move, and that'll come up after lunchtime today. Consideration about how to move the panels around the job site, right? Not even just around at the ground level, but vertically as well up the building. Yeah. Protecting the edges and the corners, yes. You may have to have some sacrificial insulations.
Taping up the boards.
Huh?
Taping up the boards as you.
I wouldn't even bother taping them. I would use something like bits of insulation or something, or cardboard that would just slide on the corners or something like that. Corner protectors. But the biggest problem I have with damaging the corners and the edges is not the transport like that up and down. It's when you're actually, say, just simply carrying a panel, it's where you leave it down. You know what I mean? When you leave down the panel, they're leaving it on metal or on a stone and it's chipping the edges. Kind of always use a bit of a soft bearer or something if you can. Or what you can do is, if you really worried about it, is if you do get a piece of polystyrene or something and maybe just cut a groove out of it and just slit it onto the bottom of the board. Huh? Pull noodle. What's pull noodle?
Swimming pool noodle.
What's the swimming? Look, guys. Our swimming pool is based. We have one of the biggest swimming pools in the world. It's called the Atlantic Ocean. All right. We don't have swimming pools. What do you mean pool needs?
It's probably a urethane tube and then you cut a slit in it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Pool noodle. Huh? Cool. All right. Learn something new every day. So that's something else you can do. Like, to be honest with you guys, you know, I can present the problems and the issues that I've come across to it, use a little bit of common sense to come up with some of the answers to make it easier for yourselves to do it. But don't just let it happen. Make sure you address the issues and stuff like that, because, as I say, when an architect comes up to do the inspection, or the guys come to do the inspection, the last thing you want to do is start getting into an argument about getting paid and getting off the job as soon as you can.